Welcome to today's episode where we're about to uncover one of medieval history's most shocking military upsets, a single battle that didn't just change the course of Spanish history, but literally destroyed one of the most powerful empires of the medieval world. Picture this: July 16, 1212. In the blazing heat of southern Spain, two massive armies face each other across a dusty plain. On one side stands the mighty Almohad Caliphate rulers of an empire stretching from Morocco to Muslim Spain, commanding what many considered the finest military machine in the Western Mediterranean. Their Caliph, Muhammad al-Nasir, leads perhaps 100,000 warriors, including elite Berber cavalry, professional slave soldiers, and the most feared bodyguard unit in the Islamic world. On the other side, a ragtag coalition of Christian kingdoms that had spent more time fighting each other than their common enemy. Led by Alfonso VIII of Castile, a king still haunted by a devastating defeat 17 years earlier, this unlikely alliance seems doomed from the start. But here's what makes this story absolutely mind-blowing. The Christians don't just win this battle. They don't just defeat the Almohads. They completely annihilate them so thoroughly that within 40 years, one of the most powerful empires in medieval history simply ceases to exist. How does an underdog coalition achieve the impossible? What was their secret weapon that turned certain defeat into total victory? And how did a single day's fighting trigger the collapse of an empire that had dominated the Western Islamic world for over a century? Get ready to discover the shocking truth behind the Battle of Las Navas de Tolosa, the day Christianity's greatest underdogs achieved the impossible. Chapter 1. The Rise of the Almohad Empire deep in the Atlas Mountains of Morocco. Around 1120 CE, a Berber preacher named Muhammad ibn Tumart stands before a gathering of mountain tribesmen. The desert wind whips through his robes as he delivers a message that will reshape the Islamic world. His voice echoes off the rocky peaks as he denounces the ruling Almoravids as corrupt heretics who have betrayed true Islam. The Almoravids have forgotten the pure unity of Allah. Ibn Tumart declares to his growing band of followers, "They worship idols, they live in luxury while true believers suffer, and they have allowed the faith to become polluted with Christian influences." The men listening aren't scholars or princes. They're tough mountain Berbers, the Masmuda tribes who have spent generations eking out a living in these harsh highlands. But Ibn Tumart's words ignite something powerful within them. He promises them not just spiritual purification, but earthly rewards, a chance to conquer the rich cities of the plains, to drive out the decadent Almoravids, and to build a true Islamic empire. What these mountain warriors do not realize is that they are about to launch one of the most successful religious military movements in medieval history, one that will create an empire spanning 2 continents. The Almohad Empire's origins lie in the religious fervor of Ibn Tumart, a Berber from the Harga tribe who proclaimed himself the Mahdi, the divinely guided one prophesied to appear before the end times. Around 1120, in the mountain fortress of Tinmel, he begins organizing what will become one of the most formidable military forces in the medieval world. Ibn Tumart's movement, called al-Muwahhidin, the Unitarians, attracts followers through a potent combination of religious reform and political rebellion. The Almoravids, who have ruled Morocco and Muslim Spain since the late 11th century, have grown wealthy and complacent. Their use of Christian mercenaries, their adoption of luxurious lifestyles, and their theological interpretations increasingly anger purist Muslims like Ibn Tumart. The early Almohad rebellion operates as a mountain guerrilla war. For nearly a decade, Ibn Tumart's followers launch raids from their Atlas Mountain strongholds, disrupting trade routes and attacking Almoravid outposts. The mountainous terrain gives them enormous advantages. The Almoravids struggle to bring their cavalry and siege equipment up the treacherous mountain paths, while the Almohads know every hidden valley and secret pass. Ibn Tumart dies in 1130, but his movement doesn't collapse. Instead, his lieutenant Abid al-Mumin proves to be an even more capable leader. While Ibn Tumart was the visionary, Abid al-Mumin is the military genius who transforms a mountain rebellion into a conquering empire. Abid al-Mumin's first major victory comes in 1132, when he leads a daring nighttime assault on the supposedly impregnable Almoravid fortress of Taski Mount. His warriors scale the walls in darkness and overwhelm the defenders. But Abid al-Mumin doesn't just capture the fortress, he completely dismantles it, carrying its massive gates back to Tinmel as trophies. This bold gesture sends a clear message. The Almohads aren't just raiders anymore, they're empire builders. The military organization Abid al-Mumin creates becomes the secret of Almohad success. The army maintains a strict hierarchy based on tribal origins and religious devotion. The Harga tribe, Ibn Tumart's original followers, form the elite corps. Next come the warriors from Tinmel, followed by other Masmuda tribes in order of their conversion to the Almohad cause. This system creates intense loyalty and competition. Every soldier knows exactly where he stands and what he must do to advance. By 1147, the Almohads capture Marrakesh, the Almoravid capital. The city's fall marks the end of Almoravid rule in Morocco, but Abid al-Mumin has much grander ambitions. He begins recruiting extensively from Arab tribes, particularly the Banu Hilal, whom he relocates from their traditional territories to serve in his armies. These Arab warriors become crucial components of Almohad military might, serving as heavy cavalry and forming important contingents for campaigns in Spain and North Africa. The Almohad military machine that emerges is unlike anything seen before in the Western Islamic world. At its core are the Berber mountain warriors, tough, disciplined, and fanatically devoted to their cause. Supporting them are Arab cavalry units, skilled in the fast-moving warfare of the steppes. The army also includes professional infantry, engineers capable of building and operating siege machines, and even naval forces for operations across the Mediterranean. Abid al-Mumin also creates a unique administrative system that allows rapid military mobilization. He divides his growing empire into provinces, placing his sons as governors. These Sayyids, nobles, can quickly raise armies and coordinate military campaigns across vast distances. Meanwhile, traditional Berber chiefs serve as advisors and field commanders, maintaining tribal loyalties while serving imperial ambitions. The Almohad conquest of Al-Andalus, Muslim Spain, begins in earnest during the 1140s. The Christian kingdoms of the north have been making steady gains against the fragmented Muslim Taifa kingdoms. The Almoravids, weakened by rebellion in Morocco, can no longer provide effective support to their Spanish territories. When local Muslim rulers in Spain appeal for help, the Almohads see their opportunity. Unlike previous Islamic interventions in Spain, the Almohad conquest is systematic and thorough. They don't just send armies across the Strait of Gibraltar. They transplant entire administrative systems, religious scholars, and civilian populations. Seville becomes their Spanish capital, while major fortifications are built or strengthened at key points like Cordoba, Granada, and the frontier fortresses facing the Christian kingdoms. The Almohad Empire reaches its peak under Yaqub al-Mansur, ruled 1184 to 1199. Abd al-Mumin's grandson. Al-Mansur embodies the Almohad ideal, a warrior caliph who leads from the front while maintaining strict religious orthodoxy. His army sweeps through Christian territory with devastating effectiveness, culminating in the crushing victory at Alarcos in 1195. At Alarcos, Al-Mansur's forces demonstrate the full power of Almohad military organization. The battle begins when Alfonso VIII of Castile, overconfident after recent successes, challenges the Almohad army despite being significantly outnumbered. The Almohads respond with tactical brilliance. They allow the Christians to charge, absorb the initial impact, then execute a devastating counterattack that encircles and destroys most of Alfonso's army. The victory at Alarcos sent shockwaves throughout Christian Europe. For the first time in decades, the Reconquista, the Christian reconquest of Spain, seems to be reversing. Almohad raiders penetrate deep into Castilian territory, threatening Toledo itself. European chroniclers describe the Almohad armies in terms usually reserved for apocalyptic visions, vast hordes of fierce warriors carrying the banner of Islam into the heart of Christendom. But the Almohad Empire's greatest strength also contains the seeds of its destruction. The same religious intensity that makes Almohad warriors so formidable also creates internal tensions. Different Berber tribes compete for influence, while Arab contingents sometimes clash with their Berber commanders. The empire's vast size makes communication and coordination increasingly difficult, especially when facing simultaneous threats in Spain and North Africa. By 1200, the Almohad Caliphate stands as one of the most powerful empires in the world. From the Atlantic coast of Morocco to the Ebro River in Spain, from the Sahara Desert to the Mediterranean Sea, Almohad authority extends over millions of subjects and controls some of the world's most important trade routes. Yet the empire's success creates new challenges. The Christian kingdoms of northern Spain, shocked by Alarcos, begin seeking new alliances and strategies. The papacy in Rome takes increasing interest in Spanish affairs, seeing the Almohad threat as a direct challenge to Christendom itself. Most ominously, the Almohads themselves begin to show signs of the same complacency that had weakened their Almoravid predecessors. When Yaqub al-Mansur dies in 1199, he leaves the empire to his son Muhammad al-Nasir. The new caliph inherits tremendous power, but also tremendous problems. Christian resistance is stiffening, internal rivalries are growing, and the empire's vast frontiers require constant military attention. Al-Nasir believes he can solve these problems through one decisive campaign, a massive invasion that will finally break Christian resistance and secure Almohad dominance in Spain forever. This decision will lead directly to the catastrophe at Las Navas de Tolosa. Chapter 2. The Christian Kingdom's Awakening. Alfonso VIII of Castile sits in his tent on the eve of the Battle of Alarcos, July 1195. Outside, his army prepares for what he believes will be another glorious victory against the Muslims. At 40 years old, Alfonso has ruled Castile for over 3 decades and has grown accustomed to success. His recent campaigns have pushed the frontier steadily southward, capturing key fortresses and expanding Christian territory. But as he studies the reports from his scouts, Alfonso's confidence begins to waver. The Almohad army approaching his position is unlike anything he has faced before. His spies describe endless columns of warriors, not just the usual mix of local Spanish Muslims and North African reinforcements, but a disciplined, professional army that moves with terrifying precision. "Your Majesty," his chief advisor whispers urgently, "perhaps we should withdraw and await reinforcements from Leon and Navarre?" Alfonso shakes his head grimly. "We cannot show weakness now. If we retreat, every Muslim in Spain will see it as a sign that the Almohads cannot be defeated. We must fight." Within 24 hours, Alfonso's decision will prove catastrophically wrong, leading to the worst Christian defeat in Spain in over a century. But from this disaster will emerge the determination and unity that makes Las Navas de Tolosa possible. The Christian kingdoms of northern Spain in the late 12th century present a complex patchwork of competing ambitions, ancient rivalries, and shared cultural identity. Unlike the unified Almohad Empire, these kingdoms, Castile, Leon, Navarre, Aragon, and Portugal, spend as much time fighting each other as they do the Muslim states to their south. Alfonso VIII of Castile embodies both the strengths and weaknesses of Christian Spain. Crowned at age 3 in 1158, he has grown up during a period of unprecedented Christian expansion. His kingdom has benefited enormously from the decline of the Almoravids and the chaos that preceded Almohad consolidation. Throughout the 1170s and 1180s, Alfonso's armies capture fortress after fortress, extending Castilian control deep into what had been Muslim territory. The Christian military advantage during this period comes from several sources. Their heavy cavalry, composed of nobles and knights fighting on horseback with lances and swords, proves devastatingly effective against disorganized Muslim forces. The rise of military religious orders, the Knights Templar, Hospitallers, and uniquely Spanish orders like Santiago and Calatrava provides professional soldiers dedicated entirely to fighting Islam. Perhaps most importantly, the Christian kingdoms develop innovative siege warfare techniques. Unlike earlier periods of the Reconquista, which focused primarily on raids and rapid territorial grabs, the Christians of Alfonso's era systematically invest and capture major fortified cities. The fall of Toledo in 1085 had demonstrated that even the greatest Muslim strongholds could be taken with patience and proper technique. Alfonso's early successes feed a dangerous overconfidence that permeates Christian military thinking. The capture of Cuenca in 1177, achieved through a brilliant combination of siege warfare and diplomatic manipulation, convinces many that Muslim resistance is collapsing permanently. When reports arrive of Almohad's strength in Morocco, Christian leaders dismiss them as exaggerated. After all, how could desert nomads threaten kingdoms that have been winning victories for generations? This complacency proves catastrophic at Alarcos. Alfonso's decision to fight the Almohads without waiting for allies stems from his conviction that Christian military superiority will overcome any numerical disadvantage. The battle begins promisingly, with Castilian heavy cavalry smashing through the front ranks of Almohad volunteers. But Yaqub al-Mansur has planned for exactly this scenario. The Almohad battle plan at Alarcos demonstrates the tactical sophistication that makes their empire so formidable. The front lines consist deliberately of lightly armed volunteersmen whose primary function is to absorb the Christian charge and slow it down. Behind them wait the professional Arab cavalry and Berber infantry, fresh and ready to counterattack. When Alfonso's knights exhaust themselves cutting through the first line, the real Almohad army strikes from multiple directions. The result is not just a defeat, but a catastrophe. Alfonso himself barely escapes with his life, and the majority of his army is destroyed. Worse, the psychological impact proves even more devastating than the material losses. For decades, Christian confidence had been built on the assumption of military superiority. Alarcos shatters that assumption and forces a fundamental reassessment of Christian strategy. The immediate aftermath of Alarcos reveals just how fragile Christian unity really is. Instead of rallying to support Castile, Alfonso's rivals in Leon and Navarre see an opportunity to settle old scores. Both kingdoms actually form alliances with the Almohads, launching attacks on Castilian territory, while Alfonso struggles to rebuild his shattered forces. The Castilian-Leonese War that follows Alarcos 1196 to 1197 represents the nadir of Christian cooperation in Spain. While Almohad raiders penetrate deep into Castilian territory, burning towns and capturing fortresses, Alfonso must simultaneously fight a two-front war against both Muslim and Christian enemies. Key strongholds like Madrid and Guadalajara fall to Almohad forces, while Leonese armies attack from the north. The military orders provide crucial support during this dark period. The Order of Calatrava, founded specifically to defend the frontier against Muslim attack, loses its namesake fortress to the Almohads, but continues fighting from other bases. The Knights of Santiago organize the defense of several key positions, while the international orders, Templars and Hospitallers, provide both military expertise and connections to European reinforcements. But the most important development during these crisis years is the gradual recognition among Christian leaders that survival requires unity. The old pattern of individual kingdoms pursuing separate agendas simply cannot continue in the face of Almohad power. This realization begins slowly and painfully, facilitated by the mediation of church leaders who transcend individual kingdom loyalties. The papacy plays an increasingly important role as the 12th century draws to a close. Pope Celestine III and his successor Innocent III begin treating the Spanish struggle not as a collection of local conflicts, but as part of the broader Christian struggle against Islam. This perspective encouraged European knights to see service in Spain as equivalent to crusading in the Holy Land, bringing fresh military resources and international prestige to the Reconquista. Innocent III, who becomes Pope in 1198, proves particularly crucial to Christian revival. Unlike his predecessors, who often treated Spanish affairs as peripheral concerns, Innocent sees the Almohad threat as a direct challenge to Christian Europe. His letters to European monarchs describe the situation in apocalyptic terms, calling for immediate assistance to prevent Islamic conquest of the entire peninsula. The technological and tactical innovations that emerge from the Alarcos crisis also reshape Christian military capabilities. Defeat forces Christian commanders to study Almohad methods and adapt their own approaches accordingly. They develop better intelligence networks, improve coordination between different types of troops, and begin experimenting with new defensive techniques. The military orders prove particularly innovative during this period. The Order of Calatrava, forced to abandon its traditional stronghold, adapts by becoming more mobile and flexible. Instead of defending fixed positions, the Order's knights learn to conduct rapid strikes and strategic withdrawals. The Order of Santiago develops similar techniques, emphasizing speed and surprise over the traditional heavy cavalry charge. Perhaps most importantly, the Alarcos crisis forces Christian leaders to think systematically about logistics and supply. Previous campaigns had relied on relatively short operations close to home bases. Fighting the Almohads requires longer campaigns across greater distances, demanding new approaches to feeding, equipping, and financing armies. The solutions developed during this period will prove crucial to the success of the Las Navas campaign. The 17 years between Alarcos and Las Navas de Tolosa transformed the Christian kingdoms of Spain in fundamental ways. The shock of defeat forces long overdue military and political reforms, while the constant pressure of Almohad raids creates unprecedented unity among former rivals. By 1211, when Muhammad al-Nasir begins his final campaign to conquer Christian Spain, he faces not the divided and overconfident kingdoms that his father had crushed at Alarcos, but a unified coalition that has learned from bitter experience. The Christians have studied Almohad tactics, reformed their own military methods, and most importantly, overcome the internal divisions that had made them vulnerable. Alfonso VIII, now in his mid-50s, has been transformed by his experiences. The proud young king who charged rashly into disaster at Alarcos has become a cautious, methodical leader who understands the value of patience and preparation. When al-Nasir's invasion begins, Alfonso does not respond with hot-headed charges, but with careful planning and diplomatic skill. The stage is set for a confrontation that will determine the future of Spain and reveal whether the lessons learned in defeat can overcome the overwhelming power of the Almohad Empire. Chapter 3. The military orders in the darkness before dawn on July 16, 1212. A group of knights kneels in prayer on the battlefield of Las Navas de Tolosa. Their white surcoats bear different crosses: the red cross of the Knights Templar, the eight-pointed star of the Hospitallers, the sword-shaped cross of the Order of Santiago, and the forked cross of Calatrava. These are not ordinary soldiers, but warrior monks who have taken vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, along with an additional vow to fight Islam until death. Brother Pedro Arias, master of the Order of Santiago, raises his voice in Latin prayer. Dies vult, God wills it. The assembled knights echo the ancient crusading cry that has echoed from Jerusalem to Spain for over a century. But these men represent something unique in medieval warfare: professional soldiers dedicated entirely to military service, with no families to support, no lands to defend, and no other obligations except war. Unlike the feudal knights of France or the tribal warriors of the Almohads, the military orders have created something revolutionary: full-time military units that can be deployed anywhere at any time. In a few hours, these knights will spearhead the charge that breaks the Almohad army. Many of them, including Master Pedro Arias himself, will not survive the day, but their sacrifice will help destroy an empire. The military orders that fought at Las Navas de Tolosa represent one of medieval Christianity's most innovative military developments. These organizations, combining monastic discipline with knightly warfare, emerged from the unique pressures of the Reconquista and the Crusades, creating professional military forces unlike anything seen in the Islamic world. The Knights Templar, founded in Jerusalem around 1120, arrived in Spain during the 1130s as the Reconquista intensified. Unlike their operations in the Holy Land, where they guard pilgrimage routes and defend isolated fortresses, the Templars in Spain become active participants in major offensive campaigns. Their international connections provide crucial links to European resources, while their military expertise helps train local forces in advanced siege warfare and cavalry tactics. The Hospitallers, originally founded to care for sick pilgrims, also evolved into a major military force in Spain. Their extensive medical knowledge proves invaluable during long campaigns, while their organizational skills help coordinate complex military operations. Both international orders establish major commanderies throughout Christian Spain, creating a network of fortified bases that can support extended military operations. But the uniquely Spanish orders prove even more significant for the Reconquista. The Order of Santiago, founded around 1170, emerged directly from the need to defend the pilgrim route to Santiago de Compostela. Unlike the international orders, Santiago Knights can marry and maintain families, making recruitment easier while preserving their commitment to full-time military service. The Order of Calatrava, established in 1158, represents perhaps the most radical experiment in military monasticism. Founded by Cistercian monks who abandoned their peaceful contemplation to take up arms against Islam, Calatrava combines the strictest religious discipline with the most advanced military training. These warrior monks sleep in their armor, maintain complete silence during meals, and spend their days alternating between prayer and weapons practice. The organizational structure of these orders creates unprecedented military capabilities. Unlike feudal armies, which can only be assembled for short campaigns during specific seasons, the military orders maintain permanent forces ready for immediate deployment. Their members have no other obligations, no harvest to gather, no courts to attend, no family responsibilities to distract them from military duty. This professional dedication manifests in superior training and equipment. Military order knights spend years perfecting their skills with sword, lance, and crossbow. They study siege warfare, learn to read terrain, and practice the complex maneuvers required for effective cavalry charges. Their armor and weapons represent the finest available technology, maintained by skilled craftsmen attached to each order. The financial resources of the orders prove equally important. Religious donations from across Europe fund their operations, while grants of land from grateful monarchs provide steady income. The Order of Santiago alone controls over 200 towns and villages by 1212, generating enormous wealth that can be devoted entirely to military purposes. This economic independence allows the orders to maintain their forces without depending on royal taxation or feudal obligations. The strategic impact of the military orders extends far beyond their actual combat effectiveness. Their permanent presence along the frontier provides crucial intelligence about Muslim movements and intentions. Order strongholds serve as bases for reconnaissance missions deep into enemy territory, while their extensive contacts with local populations, both Christian and Muslim, create comprehensive information networks. Perhaps most importantly, the orders provide continuity of leadership and institutional memory that gives Christian forces crucial advantages over their enemies. While Muslim armies often depend on the personal charisma of individual leaders, the orders maintain their effectiveness across generations through systematic training and documented procedures. The role of the orders in frontier warfare evolved significantly during the decades before Las Navas de Tolosa. Initially focused on defensive operations, holding fortresses, and protecting pilgrims, they gradually become the spearhead of Christian offensive operations. Their professional skills prove essential for the complex siege warfare required to capture major Muslim strongholds. The disaster at Alarcos in 1195 particularly affects the military orders. Several senior commanders perish in the battle, while the Order of Calatrava loses its namesake fortress and must relocate to Salvatierra. But rather than weakening the orders, this crisis forces innovations that ultimately strengthen their effectiveness. The Order of Calatrava's adaptation to its new circumstances illustrates the flexibility that makes the orders so formidable. Unable to defend a fixed position against overwhelming Almohad forces, the order develops new tactics emphasizing mobility and rapid strikes. Instead of waiting passively for enemy attacks, Calatrava knights begin conducting aggressive raids deep into Muslim territory, disrupting Almohad supply lines and reconnaissance efforts. The Order of Santiago undergoes similar evolution, developing specialized techniques for operating in the difficult terrain of central Spain. Their knights become expert at mountain warfare, learning to use the rocky landscape to negate enemy numerical advantages. They also perfect night operations, conducting surprise attacks that demoralize enemy forces and disrupt their command structures. The international orders contribute crucial expertise in siege warfare, an increasingly important aspect of Reconquista campaigns. Templar engineers develop innovative techniques for undermining fortress walls, while hospitaller medical knowledge helps armies maintain their effectiveness during long siege operations. The Order's international connections also provide access to the latest military technologies developed in other theaters of crusading warfare. The psychological impact of the military orders proves as important as their military capabilities. For Christian populations along the frontier, the presence of these warrior monks represents tangible evidence of divine favor and international support. The order's religious character gives their military activities a sacred dimension that inspires extraordinary devotion among their followers. For Muslim opponents, the military orders represent a uniquely dangerous enemy. Unlike ordinary knights, who might be motivated by personal glory or material gain, the order warriors fight with religious fanaticism that makes them willing to accept enormous casualties in pursuit of victory. Their monastic discipline creates unit cohesion far superior to that of typical medieval armies, while their financial independence makes them impossible to bribe or subvert. The coordination between different orders also develops significantly during the years leading up to Las Navas de Tolosa. Despite their different origins and rivalries, the orders learn to work together effectively in joint operations. The Spanish order's knowledge of local conditions combines with the international order's military expertise to create combined forces that are far more effective than the sum of their parts. By 1212, the military orders have become the professional backbone of Christian military power in Spain. Their permanent forces provide the core around which larger armies can be built, while their expertise in siege warfare, reconnaissance, and frontier operations gives Christian commanders crucial advantages over their enemies. The order's religious character also proves essential for the diplomatic success that makes Las Navas de Tolosa possible. When Pope Innocent III calls for a crusade against the Almohads, The presence of these warrior monks provides tangible evidence of Spanish Christianity's commitment to the broader crusading movement. European knights see the orders as proof that service in Spain equals service in the Holy Land in religious merit. As Muhammad al-Nasir begins his invasion of Christian Spain in 1211, he faces not just the armies of individual kingdoms, but the coordinated response of these professional military organizations. The order's intelligence networks provide early warning of Almohad movements, while their strategic mobility allows rapid concentration of forces at threatened points. The secret weapon that will destroy the Almohad Empire is not any single innovation, but the revolutionary military professionalism that the orders represent, a high professionalism that will prove decisive in the brutal fighting of Las Navas to Tolosa. Chapter 4: Muhammad al-Nasir's Grand Strategy in the Magnificent Palace of Marrakesh. Spring 1211. Caliph Muhammad al-Nasir stands before a massive map of his empire. The map stretches from the Atlas Mountains of Morocco to the Ebro River in Spain, encompassing millions of subjects and some of the world's richest territories. But al-Nasir's attention focuses on the narrow strip of Christian kingdoms in northern Spain, the only significant obstacle to complete Almohad dominance of the Western Islamic world. 17 years have passed since my father's great victory at Alarcos, al-Nasir tells his assembled commanders. 17 years during which these Christian dogs have rebuilt their strength and dared to challenge our authority. The time has come to finish what my father began. The Caliph traces his finger along the map's borders, indicating the frontier between his empire and Castile. This festering sore on the body of Islam must be cauterized once and for all. We will not merely raid their territories or capture a few fortresses. We will break their power completely and drive them back into the mountains where they belong. What al-Nasir doesn't realize is that his grand strategy, seemingly so logical and well-planned, contains fatal flaws that will lead directly to the destruction of his empire. His confidence, based on past successes and overwhelming material advantages, blinds him to the fundamental changes that have transformed his Christian enemies. Muhammad al-Nasir's decision to launch what he intends as the final conquest of Christian Spain emerges from a complex mixture of military logic, religious obligation, and personal ambition. The Caliph, who's ruled the Almohad Empire since 1199, faces mounting pressures that seem to demand decisive action in Spain. The strategic situation in 1211 appears to heavily favor the Almohads. The empire's North African territories remain largely peaceful, with tribal rebellions suppressed and trade routes secure. This stability allows al-Nasir to concentrate enormous military resources for Spanish operations, something that had never been possible for previous rulers dealing with constant threats across multiple frontiers. The religious dimension of al-Nasir's strategy proves equally important. As Caliph, he claims not just political authority, but spiritual leadership over all Muslims in his empire. The presence of Christian kingdoms on what Muslims consider inherently Islamic territory represents both a political challenge and a religious affront. Al-Nasir's propaganda consistently emphasizes that completing the conquest of Spain is not just politically desirable, but religiously necessary. The Caliph's personal motivations also drive his strategic thinking. Unlike his father Yaqub al-Mansur, who earned the title al-Mansur, the Victorious, through his triumph at Alarcos, Muhammad al-Nasir has not yet achieved a defining military victory. Conscious of his need to prove himself worthy of his inheritance, he sees the conquest of Christian Spain as his opportunity to surpass his father's achievements and secure his own legacy. The military plan al-Nasir develops reflects sophisticated understanding of previous Almohad successes and failures. Rather than launching hasty raids or limited campaigns, he envisions a systematic conquest that will eliminate Christian resistance permanently. The strategy begins with the capture of key frontier fortresses, followed by coordinated advances that will divide and destroy Christian armies before they can unite effectively. Central to this strategy is the psychological warfare that had proven so effective at Alarcos. Al-Nasir correctly recognizes that Christian unity is fragile and that a series of devastating defeats might trigger the same kind of internal collapse that had followed previous Almohad victories. If he can shatter Christian confidence early in the campaign, the kingdoms might turn on each other rather than uniting against him. The logistical preparation for al-Nasir's grand offensive demonstrates the Almohad Empire's enormous resources and organizational capabilities. Beginning in late 1210, the Caliph orders the assembly of what contemporary sources describe as the largest Muslim army ever gathered in the Western Mediterranean. Tribal contingents march from Morocco, while professional units move north from their peacetime bases in Andalusia. The ethnic composition of al-Nasir's army reflects the Almohad Empire's diversity and the Caliph's strategic thinking. The core consists of Berber warriors from the Atlas Mountains, the descendants of Ibn Timur's original followers, known for their religious fanaticism and disciplined fighting style. These mountain fighters, organized in their traditional tribal units, provide the army's spiritual foundation and much of its infantry strength. Arab cavalry units, primarily from the Banu Hill and other tribes that Abd al-Mumin had resettled in Morocco, form the army's mobile striking force. These horsemen, skilled in the rapid maneuver warfare of the steppes, are expected to repeat their devastating performance at Alarcos. Their superior horsemanship and archery skills give them significant advantages over Christian heavy cavalry in open terrain. The army also includes substantial contingents from Andalusia Spanish Muslims, whose local knowledge and hatred of Christian rule make them valuable both as soldiers and guides. These troops understand the terrain and climate of the proposed theater of operations better than their North African colleagues, while their personal investment in the campaign's outcome ensures high motivation. Perhaps most controversially, al-Nasir's army includes the famous Abid al-Makhzan black slave soldiers originally from sub-Saharan Africa. These warriors, personally loyal to the Caliph and trained from childhood as professional soldiers, form his elite bodyguard. Their reputation for fearlessness and absolute obedience makes them particularly valuable for the crucial moments of battle, when personal example can determine victory or defeat. The technological advantages that al-Nasir believes will ensure victory reflect Almohad Empire's sophisticated military industry. Almohad armorsmiths produce some of the finest weapons and armor in the medieval world, while the Empire's engineers design siege equipment capable of reducing even the strongest Christian fortifications. The army's supply trains include mobile workshops that can repair equipment and manufacture ammunition during extended campaigns. The intelligence network supporting al-Nasir's strategy demonstrates another area of Almohad's superiority. The Empire maintains extensive spy networks throughout Christian Spain, providing detailed information about enemy strengths, movements, and internal politics. This intelligence convinces al-Nasir that Christian unity remains fragile and that a sufficiently powerful blow might trigger the same kind of internal conflict that had followed Alarcos. The campaign begins exactly as al-Nasir plans. In early 1211, Almohad forces cross into Christian territory and begin systematically reducing frontier fortresses. The fortress of Salvatierra, headquarters of the Order of Calatrava since their loss of the original Calatrava, falls after a brief siege. The psychological impact proves as devastating as al-Nasir hoped. The military order's defeats send shock waves throughout Christian Spain. But al-Nasir's intelligence proves fatally flawed in several crucial respects. His spies accurately report Christian military capabilities and dispositions, but they fail to detect the fundamental changes in Christian leadership and strategy that have occurred since Alarcos. The kingdoms that al-Nasir expects to fall apart under pressure instead demonstrate unprecedented unity and coordination. The Caliph's understanding of Christian psychology also proves dangerously incomplete. Where he expects defeat and despair to trigger collapse, Christian leaders instead interpret Almohad aggression as confirmation that only unity can ensure survival. Rather than weakening Christian resolve, al-Nasir's early victories strengthen it by demonstrating the consequences of disunity. Perhaps most critically, al-Nasir underestimates the impact of papal intervention in Spanish affairs. His strategic planning assumes that the conflict will remain essentially local, involving only Spanish kingdoms and their immediate neighbors. The possibility that Pope Innocent III might transform the struggle into a European-wide crusade does not feature prominently in Almohad planning, despite the obvious precedent of the Holy Land Crusades. The religious enthusiasm that al-Nasir sees as his greatest strength also creates unexpected vulnerabilities. The same Islamic fervor that motivates his troops also makes them contemptuous of their Christian enemies, leading to overconfidence and tactical carelessness. The assumption that divine favor guarantees victory reduces emphasis on practical military precautions that might prove crucial in close fighting. Al-Nasir's grand strategy, seemingly so well conceived and thoroughly prepared, contains the seeds of its own destruction. The very confidence that drives Almohad planning based on past successes and overwhelming apparent advantages blinds the Caliph to the revolutionary changes occurring in Christian Spain. By summer 1212, as al-Nasir's massive army advances toward what he expects will be final victory, he faces not the divided and demoralized kingdoms that his father had crushed at Alarcos, but a united coalition backed by the full authority of the papacy and the military expertise of the crusading orders. The strategic miscalculations embedded in al-Nasir's planning, his underestimation of Christian unity, his misunderstanding of papal power, and his overconfidence in Almohad military supremacy will prove catastrophic when his army meets the Christian coalition at Las Navas de Tolosa. The Caliph, who expects to complete the conquest of Spain and secure his place as one of history's great Islamic leaders, instead advances toward a disaster that will destroy his empire and transform the balance of power in medieval Europe. The secret weapon that will defeat him is not any single military innovation, but the fundamental transformation of his enemies that he has failed to recognize. Chapter 5. The Papal Crusade in the Papal Palace at Rome. Winter 1212. Pope Innocent III reads the latest dispatches from Spain with growing alarm. The fall of Salvatierra has sent shock waves throughout Christian Europe, while reports of massive Almohad army movements suggest that Muhammad al-Nasir intends something far more ambitious than previous campaigns. The fortress of the Knights of Calatrava has fallen, the Pope tells his assembled cardinals. These warrior monks, who have spent their lives fighting for Christ, have been driven from their stronghold by the enemies of the faith. If such dedicated soldiers cannot stand against this Almohad tide, what hope have ordinary Christians? The Pope rises from his throne, his voice growing in intensity. But I see in this crisis not disaster but opportunity. For too long, the Spanish kingdoms have fought as separate entities, weakened by their divisions and mutual jealousies. Now, faced with extinction, they must unite or perish. And we, the Church Universal, must ensure that they do not stand alone. What Innocent III is about to set in motion represents one of the most successful crusades in medieval history. Unlike the troubled expeditions to the Holy Land, this Spanish crusade will attract massive European participation and achieve complete victory. More importantly, it will transform a local conflict into a defining moment for medieval Christendom. Pope Innocent III's decision to proclaim a crusade for Spain emerges from his revolutionary vision of papal authority and Christian unity. Unlike his predecessors, who often treated Spanish affairs as peripheral concerns, Innocent sees the Almohad threat as a direct challenge to the entire Christian world. His response demonstrates both his political genius and his understanding of how religious motivation can transform military possibilities. The papal bull calling for the Spanish Crusade, issued in early 1212, employs language typically reserved for expeditions to the Holy Land. Innocent explicitly equates service against the Almohads with fighting for Jerusalem itself, granting the same spiritual benefits, complete remission of sins to those who take the cross for Spain. This theological innovation removes any suggestion that Spanish warfare is somehow less meritorious than Eastern crusading. The Pope's diplomatic strategy proves equally sophisticated. Rather than simply calling for volunteers, Innocent coordinates directly with European monarchs to ensure systematic support. He writes personally to Philip Augustus of France, emphasizing that Almohad's success in Spain would threaten all of Christian Europe. Similar letters go to the Holy Roman Emperor and other major rulers, creating a sense of shared threat that transcends traditional political boundaries. The response to Innocent's call exceeds all expectations. From across France, hundreds of knights answer the papal summons. These are not desperate younger sons seeking fortune, but established nobles motivated primarily by religious conviction. The participation of such high-status crusaders lends enormous prestige to the Spanish expedition, attracting additional volunteers who might otherwise have remained at home. The Occitan participation proves particularly significant. Knights from Languedoc and Provence, who possess extensive military experience from various conflicts in southern France, bring sophisticated tactical knowledge to the Christian coalition. Their familiarity with Mediterranean warfare conditions makes them especially valuable for Spanish operations. The logistical support that European participation provides transforms Christian military capabilities. The Crusaders bring not just additional troops, but also substantial financial resources, advanced equipment, and organizational expertise. French engineers contribute the latest siege warfare techniques, while Occitan merchants help establish supply lines capable of supporting the enlarged army. Archbishop Rodrigo Jimenez de Rada of Toledo emerges as the crucial link between papal authority and Spanish reality. As both a Spanish churchman and an international figure with extensive Roman connections, Rodrigo can translate papal vision into practical military strategy. His diplomatic missions to European courts help ensure that the crusade attracts the right kinds of participants, seasoned warriors, rather than undisciplined adventurers. The military orders play essential roles in coordinating between local Spanish forces and incoming European crusaders. The Templars and Hospitallers, with their extensive international connections, help integrate foreign knights into Spanish military structures. Their experience in multiple theaters of crusading warfare proves invaluable for combining different fighting styles and tactical approaches. The timing of the papal intervention proves crucial for Christian unity. By early 1212, the Almohad threat has become so overwhelming that even the most competitive Spanish kingdoms recognize the necessity of cooperation. The arrival of prestigious foreign crusaders provides additional incentive for unity. No Spanish king wants to appear less committed to the Christian cause than visiting knights. The Crusade's religious dimension transforms the conflict's psychological dynamics. What had been a series of territorial disputes between competing political entities becomes a sacred war for the survival of Christianity itself. This transformation affects not just the participating elites, but entire populations, creating unprecedented levels of popular support for military operations. The preaching campaign that accompanies the crusade demonstrates the medieval church's sophisticated propaganda capabilities. Preachers throughout Europe emphasize that the Spanish struggle represents the defense of Christendom's western frontier, just as the Holy Land Crusades defend the eastern frontier. This message resonates particularly strongly in regions that have experienced Muslim raids or attacks, making the Almohad threat seem immediate and personal. The financial mechanisms developed for the Spanish Crusade also represent significant innovations. Unlike earlier expeditions that often foundered due to inadequate funding, Innocent III establishes systematic procedures for collecting and distributing crusading taxes. This ensures that the army remains financially viable throughout extended operations. The participation of foreign clergy alongside military forces adds another crucial dimension to the Christian coalition. Bishops and abbots from across Europe join the expedition, bringing not just their personal authority, but also their administrative expertise. Their presence helps maintain discipline among diverse contingents that might otherwise clash over matters of precedence or tactical disagreements. The international character of the crusading army creates some initial tensions, but ultimately strengthens Christian effectiveness. French and Spanish knights must learn to coordinate their different fighting styles, while Occitan and Portuguese troops develop new tactical combinations. The process of integration, overseen by the military orders, produces a more versatile and adaptable force than any single kingdom could have fielded. The intelligence advantages that European participation provides prove equally important. The papal network gives Christian commanders access to information from across the Mediterranean, including reports from merchants, diplomats, and other travelers who have observed Almohad preparations. This intelligence helps Christian leaders understand the scale and nature of the threat they face. The psychological impact of European participation on Almohad planning cannot be overstated. Muhammad al-Nasir's strategic calculations assume a purely local conflict involving only Spanish kingdoms. The transformation of the struggle into a European-wide crusade fundamentally alters the strategic balance, forcing the Caliph to confront not just Spanish resistance, but the combined military power of Western Christendom. The logistics of coordinating such a diverse coalition require unprecedented organizational efforts. Toledo becomes the primary assembly point for crusading forces, with church officials coordinating supplies, equipment, and transportation. The city's strategic location and existing infrastructure make it ideal for supporting large-scale military operations. The seasonal timing of the campaign reflects careful coordination between papal diplomacy and military necessity. European knights arrive in Spain during late spring and early summer 1212, providing time for integration and preparation before the decisive confrontation with Almohad forces. This timing ensures that the foreign contingents can participate in the full campaign rather than arriving too late. For the crucial battles, Innocent III's transformation of the Spanish conflict into a European crusade represents one of the most successful applications of papal authority in medieval history. The combination of religious motivation, international coordination, and military professionalism creates a Christian coalition far more formidable than the sum of its parts. By June 1212, the army assembling at Toledo represents something unprecedented. In the history of the Reconquista, a truly international force united by shared religious conviction and coordinated by sophisticated church diplomacy. European knights bring advanced military techniques, while Spanish warriors contribute local knowledge and tested experience. The papal strategy succeeds in transforming what Muhammad al-Nasir intended as the final conquest of divided Christian kingdoms into a confrontation between his empire and a united Christendom. The religious enthusiasm generated by the crusade creates motivation levels that surprise even contemporary observers, while the organizational capabilities of the church ensure effective coordination among diverse participants. As the Christian army begins its march southward from Toledo in June 1212, it carries not just the hopes of the Spanish kingdoms, but the combined military power and religious authority of medieval Western Europe. The secret weapon that will destroy the Almohad Empire is beginning to reveal itself: not superior technology or tactics, but unprecedented unity forged by religious conviction and papal leadership. Chapter 6. The March to Destiny, Toledo, June 20th, 1212. The ancient Visigothic capital bustles with activity as the largest Christian army ever assembled in Spain prepares for its march south. Through the narrow streets, contingents from across Europe make their final preparations. French knights adjust their armor, while Spanish infantrymen sharpen their weapons and Occitan crossbowmen check their strings. King Alfonso VIII of Castile stands atop the walls of the Alcazar, surveying the vast military camp that has transformed his capital. Smoke from countless cooking fires rises into the morning air, while the sound of hammering and shouting fills the streets as final preparations continue. After 17 years of planning and preparation since the disaster at Alarcos, Alfonso is finally ready to risk everything on one decisive campaign. "Your Majesty," approaches Archbishop Rodrigo, "the army will be ready to march tomorrow. We have perhaps 12,000 knights and infantry, the finest force ever assembled for the Reconquista." Alfonso nods grimly. Intelligence reports suggest that Muhammad al-Nasir's army vastly outnumbers the Christian coalition, perhaps by more than 2 to 1. But numbers alone did not determine the outcome at Alarcos, and they will not determine the outcome of the coming battle. The question is whether the unity and religious conviction that Pope Innocent III has forged can overcome the material advantages that the Almohad Empire still possesses. The Christian army that departs Toledo on June 21, 1212, represents the culmination of months of careful preparation and diplomatic coordination. Unlike previous Reconquista campaigns, which often assembled hastily in response to immediate threats, this expedition has been planned systematically to maximize both military effectiveness and symbolic impact. The army's composition reflects the successful integration of local Spanish forces with international crusading contingents. The corps consists of troops from Castile, Leon, Navarre, and Aragon kingdoms that have overcome decades of mutual hostility to present the united front against the Almohad threat. Portuguese forces, though smaller in number, contribute valuable experience from their own frontier wars against Muslim forces. The international contingents add both prestige and military capability to the coalition. French knights, many of them veterans of various European conflicts, bring the latest developments in cavalry warfare and siege techniques. Their heavy destriers and sophisticated armor represent the cutting edge of medieval military technology, while their tactical experience provides crucial expertise for coordinating complex battlefield maneuvers. The Occitan participation proves particularly valuable due to these knights' familiarity with Mediterranean warfare conditions. Unlike Northern European crusaders, who often struggle with Spanish heat and terrain, the southern French contingents adapt quickly to local conditions. Their crossbow techniques, developed during various conflicts in Languedoc, provide effective solutions for the mixed terrain warfare characteristic of Spanish campaigns. The military orders form the professional backbone around which the larger army organizes. The Knights Templar and Hospitallers contribute not just their own forces, but also crucial expertise in logistics, intelligence, and battlefield coordination. The Spanish orders Santiago, Calatrava, and Alcantara provide essential knowledge of local conditions and enemy capabilities, while their religious dedication helps maintain morale during difficult operations. The logistical preparations for the campaign demonstrate unprecedented sophistication in medieval Spanish warfare. Rather than depending on foraging or regular supply lines, the Christian coalition establishes systematic procedures for feeding, equipping, and maintaining their forces throughout extended operations. This attention to logistics reflects lessons learned from previous campaigns and helps ensure that the army can maintain its effectiveness during prolonged fighting. The route selection for the march south reveals careful, strategic planning designed to maximize both military and psychological advantages. Instead of advancing directly toward Almohad positions, the Christian army follows a path that allows systematic reduction of frontier fortresses while building momentum. for the final confrontation. This approach provides both practical benefits, securing supply lines and eliminating enemy strongpoints, and psychological advantages, demonstrating Christian strength to populations throughout the region. The early stages of the campaign proceed exactly as Christian planners hope. The fortress of Malagan falls quickly to the combined assault, demonstrating the effectiveness of integrating different military specialties. French siege expertise, Spanish local knowledge, and the order's professional discipline combine to achieve rapid success with minimal casualties. The capture of Calatrava represents both a practical and symbolic victory for the Christian coalition. The restoration of the Order of Calatrava to its namesake fortress reverses one of the most painful defeats of recent years, while the methodical reduction of this major stronghold demonstrates that Almohad defenses can be overcome through proper coordination and persistence. But the campaign's early successes also reveal internal tensions that threaten Christian unity. The international contingents, particularly the French knights, express increasing dissatisfaction with Alfonso's treatment of captured Muslims and Jews. Many European crusaders expect the kind of wholesale slaughter that has characterized some Eastern Crusades, and Alfonso's more moderate policies create friction within the coalition. These tensions come to a head after the capture of Calatrava, when substantial numbers of French and other international troops abandon the campaign. Some European knights return home in disgust at what they see as Alfonso's insufficient religious fervor, while others simply decide that they have fulfilled their crusading obligations through participation in successful siege operations. The departure of these contingents represents a serious blow to Christian military strength, reducing the army's size by perhaps a third and eliminating some of its most experienced fighters. But the crisis also has unexpected benefits, removing elements that had never fully integrated with Spanish strategic thinking and leaving a more unified force under Alfonso's direct control. The army's reorganization following the international departures actually improves its tactical flexibility and command coherence. The remaining forces consist primarily of troops familiar with Spanish conditions and committed to the campaign's ultimate objectives. This creates opportunities for implementing more sophisticated tactical plans that would have been impossible with the larger, more diverse force. King Sancho VII of Navas' decision to join the campaign during this period proves crucial for maintaining Christian momentum. Sancho brings not just additional troops, but also valuable expertise from his kingdom's mountain warfare traditions. Navarrese forces specialize in the kind of difficult terrain fighting that will prove essential for operations in the Sierra Morena. The intelligence networks established during the march provide increasingly detailed information about Almohad dispositions and intentions. Local Christian populations, encouraged by the coalition's early successes, begin providing systematic information about enemy movements and defensive preparations. This intelligence reveals that Muhammad al-Nasir has concentrated his forces in positions designed to block Christian advances through the mountain passes. The psychological impact of the Christian advance begins affecting both sides of the conflict. For Christian populations throughout the region, the coalition's methodical progress demonstrates that Almohad power is not invincible. Conversely, for Muslim communities along the frontier, the steady Christian advance raises questions about their ruler's ability to provide effective protection. The religious dimension of the campaign intensifies as the army approaches the crucial mountain passes that guard access to the Guadalquivir Valley. Daily masses become elaborate ceremonies designed to maintain morale and reinforce the sacred nature of the expedition. The presence of multiple bishops and abbots helps ensure that religious observances remain central to the army's identity. The logistical challenges of operating in the Sierra Morena require innovative solutions that test the coalition's organizational capabilities. The mountainous terrain makes traditional supply methods impossible, forcing the adoption of new techniques for moving equipment and provisions through difficult passes. These logistical innovations will prove crucial during the final advance toward the battlefield. By early July 1212, the Christian coalition has achieved its immediate objectives, clearing Almohad forces from the frontier region and establishing secure supply lines for the final advance. But the army's reduced size and the approaching confrontation with Muhammad al-Nasir's main force create new challenges that will test everything the coalition has learned. The march from Toledo has transformed a collection of separate contingents into a unified force with shared experience and proven capabilities. The early victories have built confidence, while the departure of uncommitted elements has created better command coherence. Most importantly, the coalition has demonstrated that proper coordination can overcome the defensive advantages that have protected Almohad positions for years. As the Christian army approaches the Sierra Morena passes that lead toward the heart of Muslim Spain, both sides prepare for the decisive confrontation that will determine the future of the Iberian Peninsula. Muhammad al-Nasir waits with overwhelming numerical superiority and the advantages of defensive positions. But Alfonso's forces bring unity, determination, and the tactical innovations developed during their march south. The stage is set for one of medieval history's most decisive battles, a confrontation that will reveal whether the secret weapon of Christian unity can overcome the material advantages of the Almohad Empire. Chapter 7. The Shepherd's Path, Sierra Morena, July 13, 1212. The Christian army stands before what appears to be an impossible barrier. The mountain passes ahead, bristling with Almohad fortifications, their walls lined with warriors ready to defend the approaches to the Guadalquivir Valley. Muhammad al-Nasir has chosen his positions brilliantly. The narrow defiles can be held by relatively small forces, while the surrounding peaks provide perfect observation points for spotting any Christian approach. King Alfonso VIII studies the terrain with growing frustration. His scouts report that every viable pass is heavily defended, with secondary positions prepared in depth behind the main defensive lines. A frontal assault would be suicidal, while any attempt to bypass the fortifications would require detours lasting weeks' time the Christian army simply doesn't have. "We cannot force these passes," Alfonso tells his war council. "Al-Nasir has turned these mountains into a fortress. If we attack directly, we'll lose half our army before we even reach the main defenses." Then, from the back of the group, a weathered local shepherd steps forward. His name is Martin Ohaya, and he claims to know a secret path through the mountains, a route so obscure that even the Almohads don't know it exists. What happens next will either save the Christian cause or lead the entire army into a catastrophic trap. The strategic situation facing the Christian coalition in mid-July 1212 appears nearly hopeless. Muhammad al-Nasir has positioned his forces to take maximum advantage of the Sierra Morena's natural defensive properties, creating what contemporary sources describe as a virtually impregnable barrier. The Caliph's defensive strategy demonstrates sophisticated understanding of mountain warfare, utilizing the terrain to neutralize the numerical disadvantages that might affect him in open battle. The Almohad defensive positions reflect years of experience in frontier warfare. The main passes through the Sierra Morena, traditional routes used by armies for centuries, are blocked by elaborate fortifications manned by thousands of warriors. These aren't hastily constructed fieldworks, but carefully planned defensive systems with multiple lines of resistance, prepared supply depots, and clear fields of fire designed to maximize casualties among any attacking force. The psychological impact of these defenses on the Christian army proves almost as significant as their military effect. After weeks of successful advances and victorious sieges, the coalition suddenly confronts an obstacle that appears insurmountable. The contrast between their recent successes and their current predicament creates morale problems that threaten to undermine the unity that has carried them this far. King Alfonso's initial response to the defensive barrier demonstrates the tactical sophistication that the Christian coalition has developed during its march south. Rather than ordering immediate attacks, Alfonso systematically explores alternatives, seeking ways to bypass the fortifications, looking for weaknesses in the defensive lines and attempting to gather intelligence about Almohad dispositions behind the mountain barrier. The reconnaissance efforts reveal the full extent of Almohad preparations. The defensive system extends far beyond the visible fortifications, with reserve positions prepared in depth and supply lines organized to support extended defensive operations. Muhammad al-Nasir has clearly anticipated a Christian advance and has used the intervening time to create defensive positions that could hold out indefinitely against conventional assault methods. The appearance of Martin al-Haya and his offer to guide the Christian army through a secret mountain path represents one of the most controversial episodes in medieval Spanish history. Contemporary Christian sources treat the shepherd's intervention as divine providence, God providing assistance to his faithful warriors at their moment of greatest need. Muslim sources, by contrast, attribute the Christian breakthrough to treachery and local collaboration. The historical reality probably lies somewhere between these extremes. Martin al-Haya, whose surname means path in Arabic, suggesting possible Muslim ancestry, likely represents the kind of local collaboration that often developed during frontier warfare. Individuals with detailed knowledge of local terrain frequently offered their services to whoever seemed most likely to reward them, without necessarily being motivated by religious or political loyalties. The path that al-Haya proposes to the Christian commanders involves a dangerous night march through terrain so difficult that it had never been considered viable for military operations. The route requires crossing steep ravines, navigating treacherous scree slopes, and following animal tracks barely wide enough for single-file passage. For an army laden with equipment and supplies, such a journey represents enormous risks even without enemy interference. Alfonso's decision to attempt al-Haja's route demonstrates both desperation and strategic brilliance. The king recognizes that conventional approaches to the Almohad positions offer no realistic hope of success, while delay will only allow al-Nasir to strengthen his defenses further. The risks of the mountain passage, though severe, are preferable to the certain failure of direct assault. The organization of the night march reveals the tactical expertise that the Christian coalition has developed during its campaign. The army divides into multiple columns, each small enough to navigate the narrow paths, but large enough to maintain combat effectiveness if discovered. The military orders take responsibility for the most dangerous sections, using their superior discipline and training to manage the technical challenges of moving through such difficult terrain. The psychological preparation for the march proves as important as the physical arrangements. Alfonso and his commanders frame the dangerous journey in religious terms, emphasizing divine providence rather than military desperation. The army's chaplains conduct special services before departure, while the presence of religious relics provides tangible evidence of divine favor for the expedition. The technical challenges of the mountain crossing exceed even the most pessimistic estimates. Equipment must be carried by hand over sections too steep for pack animals, while the darkness conceals obstacles that cause numerous injuries and delays. Several times, the advance columns lose the path entirely, requiring time-consuming backtracking that threatens to expose the entire operation to enemy detection. The discipline displayed by the Christian army during this crisis demonstrates the transformation that has occurred since the early days of the campaign. Troops that might have broken under such stress maintain their cohesion through a combination of religious motivation, professional leadership, and shared commitment to the expedition's objectives. The military orders prove particularly crucial in maintaining order during the most difficult passages. The strategic implications of the successful mountain crossing extend far beyond the immediate tactical situation. By bypassing the Almohad defensive positions, the Christian army not only avoids what would have been a catastrophic frontal assault, but also completely disrupts al-Nasir's strategic planning. The Caliph's entire defensive strategy assumes that the mountain barrier will channel Christian forces into predetermined killing zones. The psychological impact on Almohad forces proves equally devastating. The sudden appearance of Christian troops in positions that should have been impossible to reach suggests either supernatural intervention or catastrophic intelligence failures. For an army whose confidence depends largely on assumptions of strategic superiority, such a development creates profound demoralization. The speed with which the Christian army completes its mountain crossing surprises even Alfonso's most optimistic advisors. What had been planned as a desperate gamble becomes a brilliant strategic maneuver that places the coalition in an ideal position for the decisive battle. Instead of being forced to attack prepared defensive positions, the Christians now have the opportunity to choose their own battlefield. The dawn of July 16, 1212, reveals the full extent of the transformation that the night march has achieved. The Christian army emerges from the mountains onto the plain of Las Navas de Tolosa, directly threatening the rear of Almohad positions. Muhammad al-Nasir, who had expected to fight from carefully prepared defensive positions, now finds himself forced to redeploy his forces hurriedly for open battle. The successful navigation of al-Hajj's path transforms the entire strategic situation in a single night. What had appeared to be an impossible obstacle becomes the key to Christian victory, while al-Nasir's carefully planned defensive strategy collapses in the face of tactical innovation and local knowledge. The episode reveals the crucial importance of local intelligence and collaboration in medieval warfare. No amount of strategic planning can substitute for detailed knowledge of local conditions, while the loyalty of frontier populations often proves decisive in determining campaign outcomes. Alfonso's willingness to trust local guidance, despite enormous risks, demonstrates the kind of tactical flexibility that distinguishes successful commanders. As dawn breaks on July 16, 1212, the two armies face each other across the plain of Las Navas de Tolosa under completely transformed circumstances. Muhammad al-Nasir's overwhelming numerical advantages remain unchanged, but his strategic position has been fatally compromised. The Christian coalition, energized by their successful mountain crossing and convinced of divine favor, prepares for the battle that will determine the future of Spain. The secret weapon that will destroy the Almohad Empire continues to reveal itself, not superior numbers or technology, but the adaptability and determination that comes from true unity of purpose. Chapter 8. The Battle of Las Navas de Tolosa. Dawn, July 16, 1212. The plain of Las Navas de Tolosa spreads before the two armies, like a vast natural amphitheater, surrounded by rolling hills that will witness one of medieval history's most decisive battles. Morning mist rises from the ground as thousands of warriors prepare for combat, their weapons glinting in the early sunlight. On the northern edge of the plain, the Christian coalition forms its battle lines with careful precision. King Alfonso VIII of Castile takes the center, his royal standard flanked by the banners of the military orders and the greatest nobles of his kingdom. To his left, King Pedro II of Aragon deploys his forces, while King Sancho VII of Navarre commands the right wing. Behind them, thousands of infantry and crossbowmen prepare for what they know may be the most important battle of their lives. Across the field, the Almohad army presents an awesome spectacle. Muhammad al-Nasir's forces outnumber the Christians by perhaps 2 to 1, their ranks extending far beyond the Christian flanks. Colorful banners mark different tribal contingents, while the Caliph's personal tent, surrounded by his elite bodyguard, dominates the center of the Almohad position. But numbers alone will not determine this battle's outcome. What happens in the next few hours will decide whether Christianity survives in Spain or whether the Almohad Empire achieves its final victory. The deployment of forces on the morning of July 16, 1212, reflects the tactical lessons that both sides have learned from decades of warfare in the Iberian Peninsula. The Christian coalition arranges its army in the traditional three-division formation that has become standard for Reconquista campaigns, but with important innovations that reflect their recent experiences. Alfonso VIII's Center Division represents the core of Castilian military power. The king personally commands this force, which includes his household knights, the most experienced military order contingents, and the elite infantry units that have proven their worth during the march south. The Royal Standard serves not just as a command post, but as a rallying point designed to maintain morale during the intense fighting expected in the battle's center. The arrangement of the military orders within Alfonso's division demonstrates the sophisticated coordination that the Christian coalition has achieved. Rather than fighting as separate units, the orders integrate their forces to provide mutual support. The Knights Templar and Hospitallers, with their international experience, coordinate with the Spanish orders to create combined formations that maximize the effectiveness of different fighting styles. King Pedro II's left wing includes not only Aragonese forces, but also the remaining international contingents that have stayed with the army throughout the campaign. These troops, though fewer in number than originally planned, bring crucial expertise in cavalry warfare and siege techniques. Their position on the left allows them to exploit any breakthrough opportunities that might develop during the battle. Sancho VII's right wing consists primarily of Navarrese forces, augmented by troops from Leon and other northern kingdoms. These warriors, experienced in mountain warfare, are particularly well suited for the rolling terrain of the Las Navas battlefield. Their position allows them to threaten the Almohad left while providing security for the Christian army's vulnerable flank. The Almohad deployment reflects Muhammad al-Nasir's confidence in numerical superiority and his expectation of repeating the tactical success achieved at Alarcos. The Caliph organizes his forces in traditional Islamic battle formation, with light cavalry and volunteers forming the front lines, professional troops in the center, and elite units held in reserve for the decisive moment. The first line of Almohad forces consists largely of Andalusian volunteers and lightly armed tribal warriors. These troops serve multiple functions. They absorb the initial Christian assault, identify weak points in enemy formations, and provide the Caliph with intelligence about Christian tactical intentions. Their relatively expendable nature allows al-Nasir to sacrifice them freely, while preserving his professional forces for the crucial phases of battle. Behind this screen of volunteers, the main Almohad army deploys in carefully organized tribal and regional units. Berber warriors from the Atlas Mountains form the backbone of the infantry, their disciplined formations providing the stability needed for extended combat. Arab cavalry units position themselves for the rapid maneuvers that will exploit any gaps created in Christian lines. The Caliph's position at the center of the Almohad formation, surrounded by his elite bodyguard, reflects both Islamic military tradition and practical command requirements. The royal tent serves as the visible symbol of Almohad authority, while its elevated position allows Muhammad al-Nasir to observe the entire battlefield and coordinate the movements of his various contingents. The battle begins shortly after dawn with skirmishing between advance guards of both armies. Christian crossbowmen, supported by light cavalry, probe Almohad positions while seeking information about enemy deployments. These preliminary engagements reveal that al-Nasir has indeed concentrated overwhelming numerical superiority, but they also suggest that Almohad morale may be less solid than appearances indicate. The first major engagement occurs when Pedro II's Aragonese cavalry charges the Almohad left wing, seeking to achieve an early breakthrough that might disrupt enemy plans. The attack initially succeeds in penetrating the front lines of Andalusian volunteers, creating gaps that threaten to expose the main Almohad formations. For a moment, it appears that Christian heavy cavalry might achieve the kind of decisive breakthrough that had characterized earlier Reconquista victories. But Muhammad al-Nasir's response demonstrates the tactical sophistication that has made Almohad armies so formidable. Rather than committing his reserves immediately, the Caliph allows the Christian cavalry to exhaust themselves against carefully prepared secondary positions. When the Aragonese momentum begins to falter, fresh Almohad units launch coordinated counterattacks that drive the Christians back with heavy casualties. The repulse of Pedro's initial assault creates a crisis of confidence within the Christian coalition. The ease with which the Almohads absorbed and countered their attack suggests that the enemy's numerical superiority may be even more decisive than originally feared. Worse, the sight of Aragonese knights retreating in disorder begins to affect the morale of other Christian units. Alfonso VIII's response to this crisis reveals the leadership qualities that have enabled him to overcome the disaster at Alarcos and forge an effective coalition. Rather than allowing panic to spread, the king immediately orders a general advance designed to prevent the Almohads from exploiting their local success. This decision requires enormous courage, as it commits the entire Christian army to battle against overwhelming odds. The Christian general advance transforms the character of the engagement from limited tactical probing to full-scale battle. All along the line, knights and infantry surge forward against Almohad positions, creating multiple combat zones that stretch both armies' command capabilities. The complexity of the developing battle makes overall coordination increasingly difficult, placing greater emphasis on the initiative and training of individual unit commanders. The fighting that develops during the mid-morning phase reveals both the strengths and weaknesses of the opposing forces. Christian heavy cavalry proves devastatingly effective against unprepared enemies, while Almohad numerical superiority creates opportunities for envelopment and isolation of advancing Christian units. The military orders demonstrate their superior training and discipline, maintaining formation cohesion even under intense pressure. But the most significant development during this phase is the growing realization among Christian commanders that their original tactical plan may not be sufficient for victory. The Almohad army proves more resilient and better organized than intelligence reports had suggested, while enemy numerical advantages become increasingly apparent as the fighting intensifies. The morning phase of Las Navas de Tolosa reveals the true magnitude of the challenge facing the Christian coalition. Despite their successful mountain crossing and the advantages of surprise, Alfonso's forces confront an enemy that proves both more numerous and more competent than anticipated. The repulse of the initial Christian attacks creates a critical moment in which the battle's outcome hangs in the balance. The Almohad army has demonstrated its ability to absorb Christian assaults and launch effective counterattacks, while the numerical imbalance becomes increasingly apparent as the fighting spreads across the entire battlefield. Yet the Christian coalition's unity and determination remain intact despite these setbacks. The military orders continue to provide professional leadership, while the coordination between different kingdoms holds firm under pressure. Most importantly, the religious motivation that has driven the expedition from its beginning continues to inspire extraordinary efforts from individual warriors. As the morning fighting reaches its climax, both sides prepare for the decisive phase that will determine the battle's outcome. Muhammad al-Nasir holds most of his elite troops in reserve, confident that numerical superiority will eventually tell. Alfonso VIII faces the possibility that his greatest gamble may end in disaster, but he prepares for one final assault that might yet achieve the impossible. Chapter 9. The Afternoon Climax, High Noon, July 16th, 1212. The Battle of Las Navas de Tolosa has raged for 6 hours, and the Christian coalition stands on the brink of disaster. Across the bloody plain, Almohad banners advance steadily as Muhammad al-Nasir's numerical superiority begins to tell. Christian formations, battered by constant attacks, show dangerous signs of wavering. King Alfonso VIII, his surcoat stained with blood and dust, rallies his household knights for what may be a final desperate charge. Around him, the standards of the military orders still fly proudly, but their ranks have been terribly thinned by the morning's fighting. The Order of Santiago has lost its master, Pedro Arias, while the Order of Calatrava's banner-bearer lies dead among heaps of fallen warriors. "My lords," Alfonso shouts above the din of battle, "if we fail here, Christianity dies in Spain. Our wives and children will face the sword, our churches will become mosques, and the cross of Christ will be driven from these lands forever." But even as Alfonso speaks, salvation approaches from an unexpected quarter. On the Christian right wing, King Sancho VII of Navarre has been quietly preparing for a maneuver that will transform the entire battle. The giant king, so tall that contemporary sources call him a colossus, prepares to lead the charge that will shatter the Almohad Empire forever. The midday crisis at Las Navas de Tolosa represents the culmination of Muhammad al-Nasir's tactical plan and the supreme test of Christian unity. The Almohad Caliph's strategy of absorbing Christian attacks while gradually deploying his numerical superiority has succeeded beyond his most optimistic projections. Across the battlefield, Christian formations show clear signs of exhaustion and disorganization. The pressure on Alfonso VIII's center division has become nearly unbearable. Wave after wave of Almohad attacks has worn down the Castilian forces, while the Caliph's reserves continue to pour fresh troops into the battle. The military orders, despite their superior training and equipment, cannot indefinitely withstand the mathematical certainty of attrition against overwhelming numbers. King Pedro II's Aragonese forces on the left wing face similar pressures. Their initial repulse during the morning fighting has been followed by continuous Almohad pressure designed to prevent any recovery of offensive capability. The surviving international crusaders fight with desperate courage, but their numbers have been severely reduced by the day's casualties. The critical moment arrives when Almohad forces begin to overlap the Christian flanks, threatening to encircle the entire coalition army. This development, exactly what al-Nasir has planned from the beginning, appears to guarantee Almohad victory. Once the Christian forces are surrounded, their superior individual fighting quality becomes irrelevant against the mathematics of complete numerical supremacy. But Sancho VII of Navarre has been preparing for exactly this moment throughout the morning's fighting. The Navarrese king, commanding the Christian right wing, has deliberately conserved his forces while his allies absorbed the brunt of Almohad attacks. This strategy, which might appear cowardly to casual observers, actually represents sophisticated tactical thinking designed to preserve decisive combat power for the crucial moment. Sancho's physical presence contributes significantly to his tactical effectiveness. Contemporary sources describe him as exceptionally tall and powerful, capable of wielding weapons that ordinary men cannot even lift. His personal charisma and fighting reputation make him an ideal leader for the kind of desperate charge that the situation demands. The Navarrese king's assessment of the battlefield situation reveals tactical sophistication that equals his physical prowess. Sancho recognizes that the Almohad success in pressuring the Christian center and left has created a corresponding weakness in their own right flank. The Caliph's forces, committed to exploiting their breakthrough opportunities, have thinned their defenses in areas that initially seemed secure. The target that Sancho selects for his decisive assault demonstrates his understanding of Almohad command structure and psychology. Rather than attacking the nearest enemy forces, the Navarrese king aims directly for Muhammad al-Nasir's royal tent and bodyguard. This decision reflects the recognition that destroying the Caliph's personal authority might trigger a general collapse among his diverse tribal contingents. The preparation for Sancho's charge requires careful coordination with the surviving Christian forces. Despite the chaos of extended battle, the military orders maintain sufficient organization to support the Navarrese assault. Knights of Santiago and Calatrava, their numbers reduced but their determination unshaken. prepared to follow Sancho's lead in what everyone recognizes as the battle's decisive moment. The composition of the assault force reflects the international character of the Christian coalition. Alongside Sancho's Navarrese knights ride survivors from every contingent in the army: Castilians, Aragonese, Leonese, Portuguese, and the remaining foreign crusaders. This diversity, which had created coordination problems during the campaign's early stages, now provides psychological advantages by demonstrating unified Christian determination. The charge itself becomes one of the most famous cavalry attacks in medieval history. Sancho VII, mounted on his enormous destrier and wielding a sword that few men could lift, leads his knights directly toward the center of Almohad power. The thundering hoofbeats of hundreds of heavy cavalry create a psychological impact that equals their physical effectiveness. The initial impact of Sancho's assault exceeds even the most optimistic Christian expectations. The Navarrese knights smash through successive lines of Almohad defenders, their momentum carrying them deep into enemy territory. The sight of Christian heavy cavalry advancing successfully where Almohad numerical superiority had seemed invincible begins to transform the battle's psychological dynamics. The defensive measures protecting Muhammad al-Nasir's position represent the elite of Almohad military organization. The Caliph's bodyguard consists of professional slave soldiers, many of them veterans of campaigns across North Africa and Spain. These warriors, known as the Abid al-Makhzan, have been selected for absolute loyalty and exceptional fighting ability. Contemporary sources disagree about the exact configuration of the Caliph's bodyguard during the battle. Christian chronicles claim that the slave soldiers were chained together to prevent flight, while Muslim sources describe a tightly disciplined formation designed to provide maximum protective coverage. The reality probably involves a combination of both elite troops organized in dense formations that prioritize the Caliph's protection above all other considerations. Sancho VII's breakthrough to the Caliph's position represents not just tactical success, but psychological victory of the highest magnitude. The sight of Christian knights fighting within reach of the Almohad royal tent sends shock waves throughout al-Nasir's army, while simultaneously energizing Christian forces across the entire battlefield. Muhammad al-Nasir's response to this crisis reveals both the strengths and limitations of his leadership. The Caliph demonstrates personal courage by remaining at his position despite obvious danger, but his command system proves unable to coordinate an effective response to the unexpected threat. The tribal diversity that provides Almohad armies with their numerical strength becomes a liability when rapid coordination is required. The collapse of Almohad resistance begins with the flight of Muhammad al-Nasir himself. Faced with imminent capture or death, the Caliph abandons his position and flees the battlefield. This decision, though personally understandable, triggers the psychological disintegration of his army. Troops who had fought effectively while their leader remained visible lose confidence when the royal standard disappears. The pursuit phase that follows Sancho's breakthrough demonstrates the devastating effectiveness of heavy cavalry against disorganized enemies. Christian knights, energized by their success and convinced of divine favor, pursue fleeing Almohad forces across miles of open terrain. The slaughter that ensues eliminates not just the immediate military threat, but the trained cadre that might have enabled future Almohad recovery. Sancho VII's charge transforms Las Navas de Tolosa from a likely Christian disaster into the most complete victory in Reconquista history. The breakthrough that seemed impossible during the morning crisis becomes reality through a combination of tactical brilliance, personal courage, and the unity that has sustained the Christian coalition throughout its campaign. The collapse of the Almohad army proves far more complete than anyone anticipated. What begins as a tactical retreat becomes a rout that destroys not just the immediate military threat, but the institutional foundations of Almohad power in Spain. The psychological impact proves even more devastating than the physical casualties. As the myth of Almohad invincibility dies along with thousands of warriors on the battlefield, the immediate aftermath reveals the true magnitude of Christian victory. The capture of the Caliph's tent and personal effects provides tangible proof of triumph, while the systematic pursuit eliminates any possibility of Almohad recovery. Most importantly, the battle's outcome demonstrates that Christian unity can overcome any material disadvantage. As the sun sets on July 16, 1212, a new era begins in Spanish history. The Almohad Empire, seemingly invincible just hours before, lies shattered beyond repair. The secret weapon that achieved this impossible victory finally stands revealed. Not superior technology or numbers, but the power of unified purpose. Chapter 10. The immediate aftermath, July 17, 1212, dawn. The plain of Las Navas de Tolosa presents a scene of devastation that will haunt the Islamic world for generations. Thousands of Almohad dead carpet the battlefield, their colorful banners now trampled into the blood-soaked earth. Carrion birds circle overhead as Christian soldiers move among the corpses, stripping armor and weapons from the fallen. King Alfonso VIII stands beside the captured tent of Muhammad al-Nasir, examining the treasures that just yesterday belonged to one of the most powerful rulers in the world. Golden vessels, precious manuscripts, and the Caliph's personal Quran lie scattered among abandoned weapons and armor. The royal standard of the Almohads, the symbol that had struck fear into Christian hearts for decades now, serves as a trophy destined for Pope Innocent III in Rome. 60,000 dead, reports one of Alfonso's commanders, his voice filled with awe at the magnitude of destruction. Perhaps more. The pursuit continued until darkness, and our knights found Almohad bodies scattered for miles across the countryside. But the true significance of this carnage extends far beyond the immediate military consequences. Among the dead lie not just soldiers, but the trained administrators, skilled craftsmen, and experienced leaders who formed the backbone of Almohad civilization in Spain. An empire is bleeding to death, and the hemorrhage has only just begun. The immediate casualties from the Battle of Las Navas de Tolosa represent only the beginning of the catastrophe that engulfs the Almohad Empire. Contemporary sources, though often exaggerated, consistently describe losses so severe that they fundamentally alter the balance of power in medieval Spain. Christian chroniclers claim that over 100,000 Muslims died on the battlefield and during the subsequent pursuit, while even Muslim sources acknowledge casualties in the tens of thousands. More significant than the raw numbers is the quality of the losses. The Almohad army at Las Navas represented the elite of the empire's military establishment, including veteran commanders, skilled specialists, and the tribal leaders who provided political cohesion across the empire's diverse territories. The death of these irreplaceable individuals creates a leadership vacuum that proves impossible to fill. The psychological impact of the defeat proves even more devastating than the physical casualties. For over half a century, Almohad military superiority had seemed divinely ordained, confirmed by victories like Alarcos that demonstrated Islamic supremacy over Christian resistance. The sudden, complete reversal at Las Navas shatters this conviction, creating a crisis of confidence that permeates every level of Almohad society. Muhammad al-Nasir, as personal response to the disaster, reveals the depth of the psychological trauma inflicted by the defeat. The Caliph, who had crossed from Morocco with such confidence just months earlier, returns to Marrakesh a broken man. Contemporary sources describe him as refusing to see visitors, neglecting state business, and sinking into a depression from which he never recovers. His death in late 1213, less than 18 months after Las Navas, symbolizes the broader collapse of Almohad morale and authority. The succession crisis that follows al-Nasir's death accelerates the empire's disintegration. The Caliph's designated heir, Yusuf II, is only 10 years old, creating a regency situation that encouraged factional competition and regional autonomy. Different branches of the ruling family, along with powerful tribal leaders and provincial governors, begin pursuing independent agendas that fragment the empire's political unity. The immediate territorial consequences of Las Navas become apparent within weeks of the battle. The Christian coalition, energized by their victory and convinced of divine favor, begins systematic conquest of territories that had been securely Almohad for generations. The fall of Baeza, just days after the battle, opens the gateway to Andalusia and demonstrates that Almohad defensive capabilities have collapsed entirely. The capture of Ubeda follows quickly, with Alfonso VIII's forces encountering minimal resistance from demoralized garrison troops. According to Christian sources, the king orders the execution of 60,000 Muslim inhabitants, though this figure likely includes both military casualties and civilian deaths during the siege. The systematic slaughter sends a clear message to other Almohad strongholds about the consequences of resistance. The economic disruption caused by the defeat proves as significant as the military consequences. The Almohad Empire's prosperity had depended heavily on trade networks that spanned the Western Mediterranean, connecting the gold mines of West Africa with the commercial centers of Spain and North Africa. The destruction of the Spanish garrisons and the flight of Muslim populations disrupts these networks, creating cascading economic problems throughout the empire. The refugee crisis generated by Christian advances creates additional pressures on the remaining Almohad territories. Thousands of Muslims flee southward from conquered territories, overwhelming the resources of cities like Cordoba, Seville, and Granada. These refugees bring not just immediate logistical problems, but also psychological contagion, first-hand accounts of Christian military superiority that undermine confidence in Almohad resistance capabilities. The international ramifications of Las Navas extend far beyond the Iberian Peninsula. News of the Christian victory spreads rapidly throughout Europe, creating enormous enthusiasm for additional crusading ventures. Pope Innocent III's successful mobilization of European support for the Spanish expedition demonstrates the potential for coordinated Christian military action, encouraging similar efforts in other theaters. Conversely, the defeat sent shockwaves throughout the Islamic world. The Almohad Empire had been seen as Islam's strongest power in the Western Mediterranean, and its sudden collapse raises questions about Muslim military capabilities everywhere. The psychological impact proves particularly severe in North Africa, where the Almohads face increasing pressure from rival Berber groups who sense opportunity in the empire's weakness. The military innovations that contributed to Christian success at Las Navas begin spreading throughout Europe as veterans return home with new tactical knowledge. The coordination of different fighting styles, the integration of religious motivation with professional military discipline, and the sophisticated logistical planning that enabled the campaign all influence military development across the continent. The disruption of Almohad military organization proves impossible to repair with available resources. The tribal structure that had provided the empire as military foundation depends on experienced leaders who cannot be quickly replaced. Young warriors lack the tactical knowledge and personal authority needed for effective command, while the institutional memory embedded in veteran units has been largely destroyed. The financial costs of the defeat compound the military problems. The loss of Spanish territories eliminates major sources of revenue, while the costs of defending remaining positions strain the empire's resources. The tribute payments that had supported Almohad armies can no longer be collected from conquered Christian territories, forcing reliance on increasingly reluctant North African populations. The religious implications of the defeat also prove significant for Almohad authority. The empire's legitimacy had been based partly on claims of divine favor and religious purity. The catastrophic defeat by Christian forces raises uncomfortable questions about these claims, while the obvious blessing that God has granted to the Christian cause creates theological problems that Almohad scholars struggle to address. the technological and tactical advantages that the Christians demonstrated at Las Navas begin to spread to other conflicts throughout the Mediterranean world. The successful integration of heavy cavalry with infantry support, the effective use of crossbow tactics, and the sophisticated siege techniques developed during the campaign all become models for military development elsewhere. The immediate aftermath of Las Navas de Tolosa reveals the true magnitude of the disaster that has befallen the Almohad Empire. What appeared to be a local military defeat proves to be the trigger for complete imperial collapse, as the psychological and institutional damage proves impossible to repair. The cascade of consequences, military disintegration, political fragmentation, economic disruption, and religious crisis, demonstrates how a single battle can determine the fate of entire civilizations. The Almohad Empire, which had seemed invincible just hours before the battle, now faces challenges on every frontier as enemies sense weakness and allies begin defecting. The Christian coalition's immediate exploitation of their victory proves as important as the victory itself. Rather than resting on their laurels, Alfonso VIII and his allies systematically capitalize on Almohad weakness, capturing territories and destroying resistance before the empire can recover its balance. As news of the Christian triumph spreads throughout Europe and the Islamic world, it becomes clear that July 16, 1212 marks more than just another Reconquista victory. The Battle of Las Navas de Tolosa has shattered one of Islam's greatest powers and fundamentally altered the balance of power in the Western Mediterranean. The secret weapon of Christian unity has achieved something that seemed impossible: the complete destruction of an empire through a single day as fighting. Chapter 11. The Long-Term Collapse. Marrakesh, 1269. The last Almohad Caliph, al-Wathiq, stands in the same palace where Muhammad al-Nasir once planned his grand invasion of Christian Spain. But the empire that once stretched from the Atlantic to the Mediterranean has shrunk to a few scattered territories in Morocco, and even these are under assault by the rising Marinid dynasty. Outside the palace walls, the sounds of siege warfare echo through the streets as Marinid forces tighten their grip on the ancient capital. The great empire that had once seemed destined to rule the entire Western Islamic world now gasps its final breaths, a victim of the slow-motion collapse that began 57 years earlier on the plain of Las Navas de Tolosa. "Your Majesty," reports a weathered courtier, "the Marinids have breached the outer defenses. The city cannot hold much longer." Al-Wathiq nods wearily. He has ruled over the death throes of a civilization, watching helplessly as territory after territory slipped away to Christian conquerors or rival Muslim dynasties. The disaster at Las Navas had set in motion forces that no single ruler could control, triggering a chain reaction of collapse that has consumed everything his ancestors built. As the sounds of battle draw closer, al-Wathiq reflects on the bitter irony that his empire's destruction began with a single day's fighting in a distant Spanish plain. The collapse of the Almohad Empire following Las Navas de Tolosa unfolds as a textbook example of how military defeat can trigger systemic civilizational breakdown. The process takes over half a century to complete, but its inevitability becomes clear within just a few years of the original disaster. Each subsequent crisis weakens the empire's ability to respond to the next challenge, creating a downward spiral that proves impossible to reverse. The immediate territorial losses in Spain represent only the beginning of Almohad disintegration. By 1236, Ferdinand III of Castile captures Córdoba, the former capital of the Umayyad Caliphate and one of Islam's most sacred cities in Spain. The fall of this ancient center of Islamic learning and culture sends shockwaves throughout the Muslim world, demonstrating that Christian advances have moved far beyond mere frontier adjustments. The conquest of Seville in 1248 eliminates the last major Almohad stronghold in Spain, reducing their once vast Spanish territories to the small kingdom of Granada. This final Muslim state survives only by accepting vassal status under Castile, paying tribute and providing military assistance to their former enemies. The transformation from imperial dominance to tributary dependence illustrates the complete reversal of power relationships that Las Navas initiated. The internal rebellions that plagued the empire after 1212 prove equally devastating to Almohad authority. The defeat in Spain emboldens rivals throughout North Africa who had previously submitted to Almohad power. The Hafsids establish independent rule in Tunisia by 1236, while the Zionids create their own dynasty in central Algeria by 1239. These breakaway states not only reduce Almohad territory, but also eliminate crucial sources of revenue and military recruitment. The Marinid rise in Morocco represents the most direct threat to Almohad survival. This new Berber dynasty, based in the Rif Mountains, successfully exploits the empire's weakness by positioning itself as the defender of Orthodox Islam against Almohad theological innovations. The Marinids' military success against weakened Almohad forces demonstrates how completely the empire's martial reputation has collapsed since Las Navas. The economic consequences of territorial losses create additional pressures that accelerate imperial decline. The Almohad Empire's prosperity had depended on controlling the trans-Saharan trade routes that carried West African gold to Mediterranean markets. The loss of Spanish territories and North African rebellions disrupts these networks, reducing the financial resources available for military operations or administrative functions. The demographic changes triggered by Christian conquests also weaken the empire's human resources. The flight of skilled Muslims from conquered territories represents a brain drain that the Almohads cannot afford. Craftsmen, scholars, administrators, and military specialists who flee Christian rule often settle in competing Islamic states rather than remaining within Almohad territory, strengthening rivals while weakening the empire. The psychological impact of continued defeats proves as significant as the material losses. Each Christian victory reinforces the perception that God has withdrawn his favor from the Almohads, while each territorial loss encourages additional defections. The empire's original religious legitimacy, based on claims of spiritual purity and divine support, becomes increasingly difficult to maintain in the face of obvious worldly failure. The military reforms attempted by later Almohad rulers prove insufficient to reverse the empire's decline. The fundamental problem is not tactical or technological, but institutional, the tribal coalition that had provided the empire's military foundation has been shattered by the casualties and demoralization resulting from Las Navas. New recruiting methods cannot quickly replace the experienced leadership and unit cohesion that took generations to develop. The succession disputes that plagued the Almohad dynasty after al-Nasir's death reflect the broader crisis of authority affecting the entire empire. Without the unifying presence of successful military leadership, different factions within the ruling family pursue competing claims to power. These internal conflicts divert resources from external threats while providing opportunities for enemies to exploit Almohad divisions. The attempts to recover lost Spanish territories through alliance with new Islamic powers prove counterproductive. The Almohads' efforts to coordinate with the Marinids against Christian forces only accelerate their own decline by strengthening their most dangerous rivals. The Marinids gain military experience and prestige through these joint operations while positioning themselves as the true defenders of Islam in the Western Mediterranean. The final phase of Almohad collapse, occurring during the 1260s, demonstrates how completely the empire's internal structure has disintegrated. The last caliphs rule over territories that extend little beyond the immediate vicinity of Marrakesh, while provincial governors and tribal leaders exercise independent authority throughout the former empire. The central government's inability to enforce its authority, even within its core territories, illustrates the complete breakdown of imperial administration. The cultural and intellectual consequences of Almohad decline extend far beyond politics and military affairs. The empire had sponsored significant developments in philosophy, mathematics, architecture, and other fields during its peak years. The political collapse disrupts these intellectual networks, scattering scholars and terminating ambitious cultural projects. The loss of institutional support devastates Islamic learning in the Western Mediterranean. The international implications of Almohad collapse reshape the entire medieval Mediterranean world. The power vacuum created by imperial disintegration encouraged increased European involvement in North African affairs, while the weakening of Islamic naval power enables Christian expansion in the Western Mediterranean. The rise of new Islamic dynasties in the former Almohad territories creates additional complexity in an already fragmented political landscape. The religious consequences prove equally significant for the development of Western Islam. The Almohad Empire's theological innovations, particularly their emphasis on religious unity and scriptural literalism, become associated with political failure in the minds of many Muslims. Later Islamic movements in the region tend to avoid Almohad precedents, contributing to theological diversification that might not have occurred under continued imperial unity. The final Marinid conquest of Marrakesh in 1269 formally ends Almohad independence, but the empire's effective power had already been broken decades earlier. The last caliph's surrender represents the culmination of a process that began with Muhammad al-Nasir's flight from the battlefield at Las Navas to Tolosa. The inability to recover from that single defeat demonstrates how completely the Christian victory had shattered the foundations of Almohad power. The destruction of the Almohad Empire represents one of medieval history's most complete examples of how military defeat can trigger civilizational collapse. The empire that once dominated the Western Islamic world simply ceases to exist. Its territories divided among successor states and Christian conquerors who erase most traces of Almohad political organization. The long-term consequences extend far beyond the immediate region. The collapse of this major Islamic power enables European expansion into areas that have been close to Christian influence for centuries. The economic networks that had connected West Africa with Europe through Almohad mediation must be rebuilt under new management, altering trade patterns throughout the medieval world. Perhaps most significantly, the Almohad collapse demonstrates the importance of institutional resilience in imperial survival. The empire's military and political structures, seemingly so formidable in 1212, prove unable to absorb and recover from a single major defeat. The brittle nature of these institutions, hidden during the empire's successful years, becomes fatally apparent once serious challenges arise. The secret weapon that destroyed this mighty empire, the unity and determination of the Christian coalition at Las Navas de Tolosa proves its effectiveness, not just in immediate military terms, but in its long-term consequences. A single day's fighting has eliminated one of the medieval world's greatest powers. As we reach the end of this extraordinary story, the secret weapon that destroyed the Almohad Caliphate finally stands fully revealed. It wasn't superior technology. Both sides used similar weapons and armor. It wasn't overwhelming numbers. The Almohads significantly outnumbered the Christians at Las Navas de Tolosa. It wasn't even tactical brilliance, though the night march through the mountains certainly demonstrated strategic innovation. The secret weapon was something far more powerful and far more rare in medieval warfare: genuine unity of purpose. Think about what the Christian coalition achieved in 1212. They overcame centuries of mutual hostility between Spanish kingdoms that had spent more time fighting each other than their common enemy. They integrated international crusaders with local forces, creating a unified command structure that functioned effectively under extreme pressure. They maintained discipline and coordination during a grueling campaign that tested every aspect of their military organization. Most remarkably, they sustained this unity through disaster and triumph alike. When the French contingents abandoned the expedition, the remaining forces grew stronger rather than weaker. When the Almohad defensive position seemed insurmountable, they found innovative solutions rather than giving up. When the battle itself reached crisis point, they maintained enough cohesion to execute the decisive maneuver that shattered enemy resistance. This unity didn't emerge by accident. It was forged through years of shared suffering after the disaster at Alarcos, shaped by the diplomatic genius of Pope Innocent III, and tempered by the professional leadership of the military orders. Religious conviction provided the motivation, but practical cooperation made victory possible. The contrast with their enemies proves equally instructive. The Almohad Empire, for all its apparent power, was fundamentally a coalition of competing tribal and ethnic groups held together by military success and religious authority. When that military reputation shattered at Las Navas de Tolosa, the empire's internal contradictions quickly became visible. Different factions pursued their own interests rather than working together for recovery, accelerating the collapse that the battle had initiated. The destruction of the Almohad Caliphate reminds us that in human affairs, the power of unified purpose can overcome seemingly impossible odds. The Christian coalition of 1212 achieved something that individual kingdoms could never have accomplished alone. They eliminated one of the medieval world's greatest powers through the simple but revolutionary act of working together toward a common goal. That is the secret weapon that changed history, the power of genuine unity in pursuit of a shared cause. It remains as potent today as it was 8 centuries ago on the plains of Las Navas de Tolosa.